Hey, what's up guys? So today's video is going to be one of several from a series idea that I came up with recently, which was that I give a brief historical background about a certain aspect of a game, which in this case is the map in which the gameplay is taking place. And I couldn't really think of a better place to start than a game that I've really gotten into recently, which is Verdun. So while trying to think of a concept for a new video, I started to think about the things that interest me, and what is it that I'd want to see in a video. And so I started to see how I could connect two of my biggest interests together, and those were military history and gaming. I decided that I'd give it a go at putting these two things together to hopefully create something that is both enjoyable and interesting at the same time. On a slight side note, I am not a historian, so all of the information in these videos will have been researched by myself. However, I will be using multiple sources to try and increase the accuracy of that information. But having said that, it is highly likely that some of the information might be slightly inaccurate. So there may be one other slight inaccuracy through the video, and that may be the way in which I pronounce certain French and German words. Not being from either of those countries, I think it's quite understandable that some of the pronunciations might be slightly off. However, I will do my best to pronounce them correctly. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So, by 1915, French General Staff Joseph Joffre had decided that even the toughest and most efficiently protected fort surrounding Verdun would not be able to withstand the sheer power of the German Gamma guns. These things were huge, firing 420mm caliber rounds, and the actual device itself weighing in at about 140 tons. The fact that several of Belgium's large forts had fallen earlier in August of 1914 only added to his suspicion that there was no hope. If loads of Belgian forts would fall at the hands of the Gamma guns, why would it be any different at Verdun? This only added to his suspicion, as I said, and he eventually made the decision to deem the forts ineffective in a defence, and decided to leave them partly disarmed and almost wholly undefended. However, the German Chief of Staff Erich von Falkenhayn had a plan. Falkenhayn knew that Verdun, located on the River Meuse, would be defended by the French no matter the cost of lives, due to its almost mythical importance to them. Falkenhayn's hope was that by inflicting thousands of casualties, the French would eventually seek peace, and that in return the British would have no choice but to try and seek an end to the war. Falkenhayn stated, and I quote, he was going to bleed them white. Falkenhayn's choice of Verdun was also one of tactical intention, due to the fact that it was located near a German-controlled railhead. This meant Falkenhayn would have access to a steady supply of troops and supplies to the front. The German operation was nicknamed Gericht, meaning judgment or even place of execution. Operation Gericht was due to begin on the 12th of February, but snow and rain delayed the start of the offensive by making accurate artillery bombardments impossible. Fast forward just 8 days later to the 21st, and the weather had cleared and the offensive could begin. 100,000 shells fell on the French in the first hour alone, and a total of 1 million fell before the German troops could start to move out into no man's land. To the surprise of the Germans, some of the French troops survived the catastrophic bombardment and fought with rugged stubbornness, but still the Germans made steady progress. Due to Douaumont being seen as the keystone of Verdun, it was regarded as a high priority, due to its positioning making it the highest and largest fort of surrounding Verdun. Just 4 days into the assault, and the Germans are pressing forward pretty rapidly from the north, and by the 24th of February managed to reach the outskirts of Douaumont. Despite the ever-lurking offensive, the fort was only manned by a small crew of maintenance personnel, 56 French troops and a handful of artillerymen. On the 24th of February, the fort was being approached from the north by a small number of soldiers from the German 24th Brandenburg Regiment, out acting as a reconnaissance party. By this point, the majority of the French occupying the fort had moved themselves to the lower levels for added protection against the constant shelling from the Germans. Things were looking up for the Germans. This meant they were met by little to no resistance while attempting to scout and possibly capture the fort, not that they themselves knew that at this point. Even the fort's 75mm defence turret had been damaged by German artillery. As for any further resistance, only a small gunnery team were manning a 155mm turret, but were too busy being preoccupied firing at distant targets. Even the dry moat surrounding the fort, which would have held a strategic defensive advantage for the French, was not being supervised and had been left unmanned. It seemed as if everything was falling in place for the Germans. Several men from the 24th Brandenburg Regiment, being led by Pioneer Sergeant Coons, managed to reach the fort unseen. Poor weather conditions meant that there was also poor visibility, but once again played into the Germans' hands by allowing them to progress fairly easily. It is even said that the conditions were so poor that some French machine gunners scouting from a nearby village believed that the Germans were French colonial troops returning from a patrol. When Coons reached the moat, he noticed that the casemates were unoccupied and managed to enter, entering on his own due to the rest of his crew being afraid to enter in case of an ambush, and only a bolt-action rifle at his side. Coons was able to round up some of the French artillerymen and lock them up. By this point the fort was now being approached by another crew from the Brandenburg Regiment, this time led by Lieutenant Radke. Once again the crew were met by no resistance and joined forces with Coons's men inside before organising themselves to spread out and capture the rest of the French resistance. More German crews would enter the fort over time. Despite being the last officer to enter the fort, von Brandis dispatched a report to say the fort had finally been captured and received great praise in return. A few days later, he told the Imperial Majesty the Crown Prince of his heroic seizure of the fort. There was no mention given to Coons or Radke for their part, but rest assured credit was finally given in the 1930s when an in-depth investigation was given into the capture of Fort Douaumont. The fort, originally deemed ineffective, later became a place of great shelter for the Germans. The whole capture took place without a single shot being fired, with the only injury being a scraped knee of one of Coons's men. The fort became known as Old Uncle Douaumont to the Germans. The capture of the fort sent a wave of great shock through France, and when the news met Joffre, he took it with a great calmness. Joffre's next step was to ask the British on the River Somme to move up and relieve a sector on the front currently being held by the French 10th Army. This meant these troops could now be used as reinforcements at Verdun. The French Second Army made its first attempt to recapture the fort in late May 1916. They managed to hold the western end of the fort for just 36 hours before having to retreat due to taking heavy casualties. The Germans stubbornly fought to hold their position, as it provided great protection and at this time was being used as both a first aid station and logistics centre. Earlier on May the 8th, 1916, a disastrous cooking accident occurred and led to a great number of casualties for the Germans. The story goes that some German soldiers were trying to heat up their coffee using flamethrower fuel. However, being too flammable, the fuel went up in flames, setting off nearby ammo dumps and ripping through a number of hallways. Hundreds of soldiers were instantly killed, and all members of the German Grenadiers regimental staff were completely wiped out. Some soldiers attempting to flee the disaster were shot down by their own men, who, due to the soot caused by the fire, believed fleeing soldiers to be the French colonial African soldiers attempting a counterattack. A total of 679 soldiers perished in the accident. On the 24th of October 1916, 3 French infantry divisions began their goal of recapturing the fort. The assault was carried out by the elite regiment of Colonial Infantry of Morocco. Prior to the assault, Douaumont had been bombarded for days on end by 2 400mm long-range French railway guns. These were set up at Bailey Court to the southwest of Verdun. At this point, the fort had become untenable for the Germans, and they had no choice but to leave the fort due to the destruction caused by the French. The fort was eventually recaptured as it was being evacuated by the Germans. Up to this point, millions of lower caliber shells had been fired at the fort post-German capture, but to no avail. By the time the fort was recaptured, tens and thousands of men had lost their lives on both sides, both defending and assaulting Douaumont. So, that about wraps up this brief history video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it as much as I did researching it, and at least found it somewhat interesting. If you did enjoy it, please like and subscribe, as there will be more to come. As I said, this is the first of several in a series that I'm going to be doing. There'll definitely be one for each Verdun map, and I have several other games lined up that I've got ideas for as well. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.